I think we'll get started then, and then if people come in, then they'll join us. So firstly, I just want to thank everyone for joining us here for Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust's first ever virtual conference, sharing our seas, seals and people. This has been a unique experience for us, and we're so glad that even with the current events and restrictions, we have been able to celebrate the 20th birthday of the charity by bringing you a series of inspiring video talks all about our globally rare grey seals and the conservation efforts happening not only in the Southwest, but all over the UK. So for those of you who don't know me or weren't here at the last session, I'm Katie. I'm the Research Ranger for CSGRT, and I'll be hosting this Q&A session all about seal strandings with Dr. James Barnett, Abby Crosby, and Dan Jarvis. So I've got a few introductions for all of these. So all of these amazing speakers. So James Barnett's involvement with marine mammals began in 1992 when he was appointed vet to the Cornish Seal Sanctuary and later to the Sea Life Centres. After a change in career direction in 1998, he continued his interest in marine mammals as a director and later veterinary consultant to British Divers Marine Life Rescue. In 2007, he began to carry out the post-mortem examinations of seals and cetaceans from the coast of Cornwall and examines now around 30 cetaceans and 20 grey seals each year at the University of Exeter's Penryn campus. And this is assisted by volunteers. He became an honorary lecturer at the university in 2019, is a consultant veterinary pathologist to the Cornwall Wildlife Trust's Marine Strandings Network, and veterinary advisor to the Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust. He's trained numerous volunteers and authored several papers, book chapters and articles on marine mammal rescue and pathology, and in 2018 was awarded the Zoological Society of London's Silver Medal for his contribution to the public understanding and appreciation of zoology. Plus much more that I couldn't fit into that paragraph. So
Can I just say one thing? I'm not the doctor. I haven't got a PhD.
Ah, okay. soon. Abby Crosby.
Why did you have to start with James? How do you follow that?
Like this. Abby Crosby has worked as Marine Conservation Officer in the Living Seas team at Cornwall Wildlife Trust for over 10 years. I think that's right, isn't it? Yeah. 14. Wow. Managing several projects, including Sequest Southwest, the Yorkshire Beach Rangers Project, the Cornwall Marine and Coastal Code Group work, and the Marine Strandings Network. Any more that I've missed, Abby?
No, that's the main stuff, yeah.
Abby has been a key player in Cornwall's marine mammal conservation network for many, many years, and also a major inspiration to us here at Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust, and was the leading light behind us setting up our first ever community-based systematic seal survey on Lewis Island, which pioneered the way for others. Plus a lot more, again, that I could not fit in the paragraph.
Oh, that's lovely, thank you.
So next up is Dan Jarvis. Dan has been working in marine conservation for over 18 years as trustee and secretary for Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust, as well as playing an active role in the Sea-Watch Foundation, Orca, Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and British Divers Marine Life Rescue. He worked for over 10 years at the Cornish Seal Sanctuary on the animal care team before moving on to join BDMLR in his current national role as Welfare Development and Field Support Officer, and also, I believe, Area Coordinator for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. He helps to run the charity's day-to-day operations, while particularly being involved with rescue support, volunteer training, development, conservation project work, and outreach to the public and other organisations. So thanks so much, all three of you, for joining us today. So it's going to work like this. It's an informal Q&A session. It would be amazing if you guys could get involved and send me some questions on the chat, and I'll be able to ask everyone the questions. I will try my best to get through all of them, but we are limited in time, but I will really try. It's easier said than done. But yeah, I think I will start. Oh yes, make sure that you send it to the CSGRT host, not to the other name that you have an option for. So I think I'll get started, and I'm actually going to ask quite a generic question for all three of you, because all of you are linked hugely to the work of the Cornwall Marine Strandings Network. And a lot of people on the call will know what that is and how it works, but some people might not have heard of it at all. So I was just wondering if we could go through what it is and your individual contribution to it. And I think I'll start with Abby, if that's all right.
Of course. So the Marine Strandings Network has been running for over 25 years. We're the primary recorder, the licensed recorder for all dead organic material that washes up around the coastline. It's, this Cornwall Wildlife Trust, I should say, and the Environmental Records Centre have been recording strandings for a long, long time. We've got records dating 100 years or so back, but the processes became more systematic, sort of back in the late 90s. We had Stella Turk, who was incredible at sort of beginning to coordinate this strandings network for Cornwall. And then it moved on to Jan and Jeff Loveridge, who were absolutely instrumental in establishing a very professional, well set up, systematic, a process of recording our strandings, and created what it is today. Absolutely. So we record all dead organic material that washes up around the coastline. We do that. So parts of our data is under the Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme. So we're part of a national scheme as well with what we're bringing in. So it's incredibly valuable and used for the conservation of cetaceans on a very high level. And really, I kind of now I've rambled a lot about these amazing people. I've forgotten what the original question was, but ultimately we've been running for over 25 years. It is dependent entirely, I think everyone will agree, Dan and James, on volunteers. Although we coordinate it to keep it working, volunteers make up every single level of the project. So we have this 24-hour hotline that we depend entirely on, which is run by volunteer hotline coordinators. We then have a team of we've got 180 trained volunteers now who will go to the site and record these carcasses in situ on the beach. Then, James, I'm sure, will emphasise that we have volunteers that assist James with his postmortems, and James himself does a lot of his work voluntarily. And then we have people helping us to process the data back in the office, although we do have the amazing Nikki and Anthea, our data officers, and they also have volunteers that assist them because we have such a huge amount of data coming in. We see sometimes a fifth of all UK strandings, 20%, just in this one county alone. Which is a phenomenal volume, and therefore the work that we do is just vital in providing this massive chunk of data to this national database. We work really closely with Dan, and maybe it's over to Dan now to sort of talk about how BDMLR come into it. I mean, it's just always in partnership with them.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. As Abby says, it's very much volunteer based. Again, at BDMLR as to how we operate. We run a one-day training course, and anyone can come along. You don't have to be a diver or anything, and you learn all of the marine mammal identifications and the first aid techniques and rescue techniques that we use for them, and then all of those details from those volunteers goes onto our database. So again, much like when we get a call, as the Marine Strandings Network does on our 24-hour hotline, we'll then put a mass message out to all of our volunteers in that particular region, and it's just whoever's available calls in and gets the details and attends that incident, and then feeds back to head office what the assessment is on that particular animal. Sometimes it is animals, particularly with the cetaceans, as we don't have rehabilitation options for them in the UK. We do have to deal with them when they're live stranded on the beach, either to release them or to put them to sleep if that's what's in the animal's best interests and in their welfare. So if obviously that's the case, or if the animal dies, because quite often they're in poor condition or have poor health for one reason or another, a lot of our volunteers down here in Cornwall, of course, we cross-pollinate with the Marine Strandings Network, and it's just a matter of changing hats to then begin recording the animals' measurements, photographic evidence, and then onwards to James for post-mortem examination, which I think quite nicely flows back to James now.
Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, I do the cetacean strandings for the Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme, which some of you may be aware of. It's run out of the Institute of Zoology. The programme manager is Rob DeVille, who a lot of you would have met at the Strandings Forums, brilliant Strandings Forum that are held every year. And I have a full-time job outside of this, so like everybody else, I'm a volunteer. And when an animal comes up on the beach and is either dies or euthanized through British Divers' intervention, according to what's appropriate, or if there's a fresh enough carcass on the beach or an animal that's dead stranded, then I will get a message. And what I do is I then put out a message to all the volunteers who help with the postmortems. And I have a team of volunteers that have all gone through a health and safety course at Tremay to see who's available. And I have a number of key people who I work with in that respect, and I suppose the obvious one is Kelly Astley, who I work very closely with on this. And also I liaise with the hotline coordinators, who without the hotline coordinators, none of this would happen. They're absolutely brilliant. And glad to see some of you with us today. And they help organise retrieval from the beach. And then we have some very key carriers who bring the animals in. And I think probably the one who really does need a mention is Mick Dorton, who without Mick, an awful lot of the animals that strand on our beaches that are appropriate for PM would not get in for post-mortem examination. So he's an essential part of it. So hotline coordinator liaises with the carriers and with the people on the beach. Mick usually will go down and he'll usually co-opt a team of people. Often, I don't really want to go into the processes, but he's an unbelievable ability to persuade people to help, and gets the animal in, and we then PM it evenings and weekends because we're all full-time in jobs. So we usually get in there sort of 6:30 in the evening at the university. We'll start the PM and we make leave, depending on the size of the animal or how many we've got to do. It could be anything from 9:30 at night to midnight, depending on what it is. And we'll crack on with the PM. Seals, we also do seals, and I know seals is the real remit of what we're talking about today, but I think we have to point out that seals are not well funded as far as postmortems are concerned. So the money we get for seals is, the way we manage to do seals is generated through a number of different income streams, if you like, through the University of Exeter allowing us to use their facilities and covering the cost of consumables and disposal, even though they're not being paid for it by the CSIP. The APHA, the old VLA, providing bacteriology, and then a pot of money which has been from different sources for many years, but now is back with the university providing funding for the histopathology, which is often a vital part of the investigation that we do. So we're able to do seals, and we are outside of Scotland. We're really the only place that is doing seals systematically in the UK, which is great. We're building up some useful data in that respect. And we are also, the other thing that you need to be aware of is that we are the real hotspot for bycatch in cetaceans in the UK. And the information that we provide back in terms of pathology of bycatch and cases of bycatch is absolutely vital in terms of informing government for what we do down here.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just add in? Sorry, but so obviously what James does with the post-mortem is in like a very scientific, professional scientific process. The rest of strandings with our volunteers on the beach is what you would classify as citizen science. And, you know, you will see it in conservation, huge debates about value of citizen science for conservation. And the Marine Strandings Network is an example of the highest quality of citizen science that I think you can possibly get, you know, because the data that they obtain is so valuable and so recognized that it actually has very effective conservation outcomes. So yes,
I would argue that all of it, including the post-mortem examinations, is citizen science. I'm working with a team of volunteers. We're all volunteers, and our funding is not always easy in terms of what we do, but we all do it because we want to do it. We want to contribute, and we're not. You know, I don't consider myself a professional because I'm not working this full time. I do this as a volunteer, and we're all contributing as far as citizen science is concerned, and that's right the way through to the post-mortem stage. So it's an amazing process what we do down here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like the highlights from that is, you know, Marine Strandings is only one aspect of how all of these organizations collaborate as a network in conservation, not just for seals, but for the whole of marine conservation in the Southwest. And as you said, the most important thing is that volunteers are involved in all of it, and it actually couldn't happen unless we had so many amazing volunteers. Because I know as well that British Divers Marine Life Rescue is volunteer driven as well. That's something to definitely point out. And you know, and we're contributing to really important research, you know, through people that have not only the knowledge but also the interest and the passion in it, that really makes it such an amazing process.
I think, yeah, perhaps people probably don't appreciate how unique the network is. Really, like Dan and James, I'm about to call you Daves. I was going to join your names together like some celebrity couple. And people don't realise how unique the network is. That it's used as a model in lots of other places, not just in the UK but in the world. And I remember attending an amazing opportunity, an amazing conference where people from America were coming up to me to speak about the Marine Strandings Network and what we do and how superb it is. And so for people to appreciate that it has global recognition for what it does and what the people within it do, I think not enough people appreciate that sometimes. So yeah, I'd like to highlight that.
It's actually interesting that you should mention America, because we have a question from Kim Aikman, who I know is from America because she was on the last session. And she's talking about asking about rescues. So she says, here we do not rescue in rookeries or haul outs where other seals are nearby. This is sometimes hard for the public to understand why we would not rescue a seal in need. We try to explain that we cannot harm the many to rescue the one, because harbour seals are extremely skittish. So where she is, it's harbour seals that seem to be the main species. Do you rescue on rookeries or haul outs? And if not, how do you explain to people why you cannot rescue a seal in certain circumstances? I think I'll probably go to Dan with this one.
Yeah, that's a really great question, actually. It's a really fine balancing act, and in most cases we don't go into rookeries or haul out sites to rescue seals. So certainly some of the big sites over on the east coast of England, the really well-known ones, we don't go wading in amongst the seals to find animals that might need help or anything. We do very much wait until we've got reports, and usually those are from seals that are on different beaches or away from the rookery at least, or haul out site. There are rare occasions where we might go in, and if that's the case, then we'll take a lot of advice from whoever the landowner is, and if there's any interested stakeholders. So of course in Cornwall that would be people like Soothsayer and the Cornwall Seal Group Trust volunteers, National Trust obviously are landowners at a lot of sites around the country where seals haul out as well. So we'd be in communication with them to talk through what's the situation, the specific situation, what are the needs of the animal that's been reported. So particularly things like entanglement are the ones that were getting reported to us. And sometimes it is making a judgment call whether it is in that animal's best interests to be rescued there and then, where it is, and whether that will cause disturbance to the rookery, and if so, how much and how bad could it be. So for example, if it was on a sandy beach, that would be less damaging to the animals that are disturbed and go towards the water in a stampede than ones that are on rocks, especially sharp rocks covered in barnacles and things like that. So these are all things that we would take into consideration. And again, having worked on many occasions with Sue on certain rescues, but sometimes we say no, sometimes it's not appropriate to go in and rescue that animal at that particular time because the damage is going to be too great to the larger number of animals that are also present on the beach, and we might have to wait maybe a day, a week, even months in some cases to rescue that particular entangled animal. So it's very case specific, I guess, is what I'm saying, and we take each one as it comes, and there's a lot of different factors that we have to consider whether we decide to go in or not.
Yeah, I know that actually Sue is on the call. I don't know if Sue, if you had anything to add to that at all, as you're involved in a lot of those rescue decisions.
I think, as Dan has said, that every situation is potentially different and has to have a unique decision made about it. It's clearly better to have fewer animals affected by the decision. And most of the time, I would imagine, I think, Dan, what happens is that if the animal's on its own and it's a one-off and it's in need of rescue, the decision is made to do the rescue. If it's an animal on its own and it's not able to be rescued, then that's when you have to start talking to people who might consider it in need of rescue, and therefore, you know, you need to explain why you're making the decision to not rescue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the other sort of half of the question, was how do we tell people about that particular thing. Sometimes it's down to access, because the animals just are really difficult to get to anyway. Sometimes they're down cliffs, or you know, human access is just really difficult to get onto that particular beach anyway in the first place. So sometimes that's a reason why we also have to explain to people and get them to understand why it's so difficult to go in. Another thing to actually mention is we also get a lot of calls about adult seals, particularly grey seals, that are entangled as well, and they're much more difficult to handle than pups, which, you know, can take maybe 2 or 3 people to carry out an effective rescue of safely. An adult is, you know, that's a whole team of quite experienced people and with much more specialist and heavy duty equipment. So it's getting all of those people and that equipment in the right place, again, to do it safely for everyone and for the animal as well. So these also affect some of the reasoning for whether we can or cannot rescue a particular animal at a particular time.
Great, thank you so much, Dan, and also Sue, for that. I think we'll head to a sort of more post-mortem focus for the next question. James, you mentioned that you also do a lot of cetacean post-mortems, and we've got a question here that says, how does the cause of death in seals compare to that in cetaceans that you've seen?
That's a good question. We see probably nearly 50% of the cetaceans at IPM are bicaught, which is a large number, and of the remainder, infectious disease is fairly key, particularly parasitic pneumonias, and both bycatch and parasitic pneumonias are things that we see a lot in seals as well. So there's certainly similarities in what we see, but the proportions are different. We do see a lot of trauma cases in seals, there's no doubt about that. A lot of them are more sort of chronic traumas that have been going on for some time with secondary infections setting in. We don't see those necessarily so much in cetaceans. We tend to see acute traumas much more often, you know, particularly bycatch is an acute trauma in cetaceans. We see the odd case of entanglement comes in for PM, and Dan and Sue probably can talk even more about this than I can, which is a significant chronic trauma in seals, but actually the number we get in for PM is relatively low, a lot of it due to the intervention of others, to be honest, in terms of being able to get these animals sorted out on the beach. But we don't see many chronic entanglements down here in cetaceans, whereas if you go to Scotland, they deal with it a lot in minkies, of course up in bureaus and so on. So they have a different, you know, if you go around the UK, you will find different relative numbers of causes of death in different parts of the country, very much so, and it really does come down to species composition. You know, we deal, in the cetaceans, we deal, probably 3/4 of the animals we deal with are common dolphins around the Cornish coast as far as strandings are concerned. We used to do a lot more harbour porpoises. It's quite interesting actually, just subjectively looking at it. I don't know if Abby wants to comment in terms of the number of strandings you see on the beach, but certainly in terms of the number of PMs. When I first started doing this, it was much more closer to 50-50, porpoises and common dolphins, and now it's predominantly common dolphins, and which we predominantly see bycatch. So it's a massive thing for us as far as post-mortem cetaceans are concerned. It's a big thing in seals as well, but it's a smaller proportion of cases.
I guess, Abby, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the bycatch protocols that the Marine Strandings Network have.
Yeah, that was just literally read my mind, because we've obviously got for bycatch in cetaceans, it's viewed that there is the potential to assess for bycatch fairly effectively on the beach in situ. And as a result of that, the Trust for many years have been looking at a protocol called BEEP, which is the Bycatch Evidence Evaluation Protocol. And that is where we ultimately just guide our volunteers to take really specific photographs of specific external features so that we can build up this picture of the potential cause of death in these animals on the beach, when, you know, we cannot always take all carcasses to post-mortem. They may not be suitable to do so. It may be that we can't get someone out to it. So of the sort of, you know, 200 plus cetaceans that wash in, perhaps sort of 30-ish will go to post-mortem, which leaves, you know, a huge percentage that don't have that possibility. So BEEP is, you know, potentially a very, very valuable tool. And my colleague Nikki Clear is hoping to do some significant research into BEEP to validate it as a methodology. So that's really exciting stuff. Now in seals, and actually James and Sue are far more you know, experienced to say this, but it's much harder to assess their external features, I guess ultimately due to their coat, you know, the I was about to say pelage, but is it a pelage? Yeah. And anyway, but you know, we are so fortunate that we have these seals being sent in to us. We have the public calling them in now. We have volunteers incredibly keen and able to go out and record them. So we're still, you know, obtaining this fantastic data, and it's still an opportunity for us to review them and assess them. And so we've created SEEP, or, you know, the team created SEEP with the support of Cornwall Seal Group and Research Trust and James. And that again is guiding our volunteers to take really specific photographs of these seals in situ on the beach. And then we can try and look at these photographs to see if it gives us any clues into the cause of death. What we're doing, I think, at the moment with seals, if the team agree, is that it's really valuable when we can assess them with SEEP and still get them into post-mortem, because then we're backing up some of these features with actual pathology, and that's super stuff, that's superstar stuff. So we're still at that sort of stage with SEEP. But it is something, you know, we're really pushing with our volunteers. When we do our training days, you know, we really highlight and emphasize the importance of what the volunteers are doing and getting, and the quality of the data and the photographs that we get coming in, so that we can continue to progress with SEEP. I don't know if the others, Sue or James, want to add to that at all.
Well, bycatch in seals is much more difficult to diagnose than bycatch in cetaceans. There's no doubt about that. You do see a lot less. The most valuable data, dare I say, it really comes from those animals that you're known to have been bycaught. They've been observed being bycaught or found in nets. And without that sort of knowledge, and the knowledge of people that's gone before, there's some good references, you know, some good publications out there on what's been done before. It would be very difficult to come to those conclusions with seals. It's a lot more tricky to try and diagnose bycatch in a seal than it is in a cetacean. And I'm sure that we do miss cases. Sometimes you see no external lesions at all, but you see some characteristic pathology which you've ruled out all other potential causes of death, and there's some characteristic pathology internally which suggests to you that it is likely to be a case of bycatch. But you call it inferred bycatch because you suspect it is, you can't be 100% sure that it is. It's a tricky one, and we know it happens. You know, we know from reports that have been done through fishermen, some questionnaires that have gone out there in the past, some surveys that have been done. We know bycatch in seals is a big problem, but in terms of pathology, it can be quite difficult to prove it.
I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult, James, is the fact that seal skin is cross-collagen fibres, therefore very strong. And I know that I learned from you that you have to replace knife, I can't remember what they're called now, but you have to remember knives, sorry, to make sure that, oh, sorry, you have to make sure, why is it not record? Sorry. You have to replace your knife so that you can actually cut the skin because it's so tough. But there are certain things that you can potentially look for if an animal's been a seal's been bycaught.
You don't always see them, though, see?
No, I know you don't. No, absolutely not. But there are some tells that sometimes are present.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, everyone. So just a reminder to everyone to do send in your questions on the chat. If any of these answers are sort of sparking ideas for you, then send them in to me. I have got another one from Kim, and she says, have you seen a food supply problem for the seals as a result of climate change or fishing that has resulted in low body weights or emaciated seals? So I think actually I'm going to ask Dan about this in terms of maybe pup rescues first and then move on to James.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Really interesting subject area. I mean, probably a lot of what I'm going to say is a personal point of view and lots of anecdotal information. But over the last nearly 10, well, probably about 8 years or so, since 2013-14, that winter season, it has become very noticeable to me, and I know it has others as well, who have been doing this for a long time in this area, that we do seem to be getting more storms coming in off the Atlantic in the autumn and the winter now, and they're getting more severe and more frequent over the years as well. And this is one of the, shall we say, symptoms of global climate change, the effects of global climate change. So it's, to me, it feels like we're seeing it actually happening in real time now, that change. And we have had particular times in certain seasons. So 2017 and 18 was by far the worst one, when we had a lot of storms in that particular winter. Some of them coincided with our peak in pupping in our local region here in southwest England, and also unfortunately coincided with some of the biggest spring high tides of the year as well. And we've certainly seen a lot of casualties as a result of that. But also later in the season, when the pups are older and are independent and learning to feed for themselves and find their way in the world, when we've had storms at that time, particularly if it's a prolonged period of storm activity, we're getting a lot more calls to pups that we're going to, and many of them, or quite a large proportion of them, have got signs of exhaustion. They're very underweight, malnourished animals. Some of them do have injuries as a result of the storm activity as well, being dashed on rocks, swept off beaches, that sort of thing, it seems. So I would say, yes, we're seeing a change in the proportion of the reasons why seals are being called in and reported to us, and also for the proportion of the seals that are being picked up and taken in for care as well. Again, I caveat that's an entirely personal point of view, and based on lots of anecdotal evidence. We just don't have that really written up scientifically properly at the moment, but the data is there. I think that would support the claim if it were.
Great, thanks, Dan. James, maybe in relation to some of your recent research, maybe talking about whether you think food supply shortages or anything else is contributing to some of the deaths of seals that you've investigated.
It's a really difficult question to answer, because we're obviously seeing a very small proportion of the number of seals that die around the Cornish coast coming for PM, and Abby's already pointed that out. And that's the case with seals as well as it is with cetaceans. As you know, the presentation I gave is pretty much the basis of a paper that we're writing at the moment, which I'm hoping to present for publication in the next few weeks, on seal pathology for the last 7 years, since we've been doing it at the University of Exeter. So really, that is very much a snapshot, and I'd have to go back and look at previous work that we've done when I've been elsewhere over the last few years in Cornwall to say whether there's been a change. But what I did find is that certainly the majority of pups that we PM'd were underweight. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But most of them had other conditions going on that could potentially explain why they're underweight. However, you can also flip that round and say, could these animals have suffered from these conditions because they're underweight and immunosuppressed? And it's quite difficult to tease that out, as the chicken and the egg, which came first, the starvation leading to immunosuppression leading to infectious disease, or the infectious disease leading to condition loss because the animals can't feed effectively. So I don't think I can answer that question. All I can say is that a large number of the animals that I PM at the moment are underweight.
Great, thank you, James. So I think I'm going to sort of move to Abby with a question about, the actual recording or what does someone, you know, any member of the public do if they encounter a dead marine animal, a seal, a cetacean, or, you know, even actually seabirds, what have you? What should they do? Also, what should they not do?
Okay. Yeah, so the first thing is, as you mentioned, any dead organic material, the Strandings hotline records. So, you know, even this jellyfish at the moment, it's so frustrating when people anecdotally tell you about these wonderful like violet sea snails and, you know, fascinating jellyfish they're seeing, and they don't record them. We're like, get them on the hotline. So we desperately want people to send in any records of dead organic material that they find around Cornwall. So anything at all. We've got a 24-hour hotline that I would love everyone to put in their phone. I'm trying to see if I've got a card. I do have a card. Should I put it up to the... Oh, no, I got the seals. Gonna living well scupper that.
I've got one.
24-hour hotline. So 0845
0345.
0345. That was the old number. 0345 201 2626. And that is 24 hours a day, all year round. I mean, it's phenomenal. Yeah, Christmas Day as well. They're just amazing people. So send it in. Also, get as many photos as you can. You know, everyone's got decent phones at the moment, decent cameras on their phones. Get as many photos as possible and even send that in to us. So we have a specific email account, which is really easy to remember. It's strandings@cornwallwildlifetrust.org.uk. So you can send in you yourself, even if you're not a trained volunteer, you can get those photos and that records immediately into the hotline straight away. So that's what everybody needs to do. And those that are interested could become a trained volunteer, because we do quite thorough health and safety and risk assessments with Strandings training, because it obviously comes with risks, which we'll go on to. James does our part of our health and safety training. So, you know, do be aware that these carcasses do potentially carry significant diseases, and they're not, you know, just stay far away. And if you do for any reason come into any contact with them, ensure that you wash yourself and your kit thoroughly, which can happen. So keep your distance. Appreciate they are sort of potentially hazardous, whatever that word is, and inform maybe a local beach authority if you can, but otherwise the hotline will do that for you. So yeah, that's all I would say. And maybe James wants to expand on some of the diseases and risks that they carry.
You really want to go into that?
Well, not in detail, but it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There are some that you need to be aware of. I don't think this is probably a good time to get into the diseases, but yeah, just you know, as long as you follow sensible precautions, you wear protective clothing, you know. To be honest, there's a much bigger disease risk out there at the moment, which is scuppering everything. So, but yes, we just need to get it into proportion. But it is something that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. The best thing is just take photos and then don't touch.
And actually, I'd like to just add in there, because Marine Strandings Network is so thorough with the health and safety, you know, to adapt it to take into consideration coronavirus is very easy, because we're so thorough that actually, you know, the risk is absolutely no higher with our volunteers in the field carrying out the right protocols. So we were able to start up our Strandings volunteering, which is great.
I wish we could say the same for postmortems.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good lead on, James, because I have actually had a question from Lou Hatwell. She says, I'm moving back to Cornwall in September to finish my degree, and her main focus is in pathology. And she's keen to get involved with postmortems. You obviously mentioned that you know, you have volunteers assisting you, and she's wondering how to go about this.
Best thing to do is give me an email. Quite happy for you to email that to Lou afterwards. No problem at all. I've got to say that at the moment it is looking quite difficult for the restart of postmortems at the university specifically. And after a Zoom conversation I had with Robbie McDonald at Exeter and Rob DeVille at CSIP yesterday, I think it's very clear that the way we carry out postmortems at Future in the University of Exeter when it restarts is going to be dramatically different to what we're doing now. And certainly the number of people who will be able to attend PMs is going to drop substantially. We're probably going to be able to only have a maximum of 2 people doing them at any one time. If we can get away with 2, we're going to struggle actually to get beyond 1. So it's going to make it very, very different in the future as to how we do this.
Thanks,
But
James.
please get in touch. Doesn't mean there's no chance, but I'm afraid it does reduce the chance. We have 70 people. I think it's about 70 people on the WhatsApp group for PMs. It's a lot of people who volunteer their time. It's an amazing resource. But unfortunately, those 70 people spread out over only 2 people, one of which is me, in the PM at a time, is going to really reduce people's opportunities to get involved, which is very sad.
Yeah, I'm guessing though that at some point Marine Strandings Network will be doing some volunteer training. Well, you know, we'll see what happens in the future, but that might also be another opportunity for anyone who wants to get involved in the Marine Strandings Network in Cornwall.
We've got both the forum booked for September, which is our annual conference that everyone is very welcome to, and we've got training in the diary for sort of November time. And you know, we're not cancelling either yet. We're completely aware of realistic expectations, but we're not cancelling either yet, just to keep things open. But we will consider training, because we're still, you know, going to be getting calls in. We'll still be sending volunteers out every year. Naturally, volunteer involvement, you know, changes and commitments changes. So it's always valuable us doing training every year. So we'll consider it. Definitely get in touch, and we can put people on the list of those interested.
Yeah. So Lou, if anyone needs any communications being sent to different people, you can always email me, Katie, Katie, at cornwallsealgroup.co.uk, and I'll pass on information to the relevant parties. So hopefully that's answered your question, Lou. Next question's coming from Emily, and it says, what are some of the interesting strandings over the last few years, and why do you think they happened? That's open to all 3 of you, really.
Well, James, we've got to start with some of the cool dead cutting up stuff.
Right, hold on a sec.
I was about to say, I've got the 2019 interesting cases.
That's probably the coolest recently. That was unbelievable. So this is the fin whale that stranded at Nares Head, near Nares Head, on the south side of the Helford earlier this year. Obviously, very, very sad story. And the animal was stranded alive, but obviously didn't survive. It was in very poor body condition. But in terms of post-mortem examination, those things are a real challenge. And we did the best we could under the circumstances. But certainly big animals on the beach are pretty dramatic. And of course, I suppose the other one that stands out really is the sperm whale at Perranporth, which unfortunately, people like Dan were far more involved than I was, because it's stranded during working hours. I can't attend the PM because my full-time job under those circumstances. Luckily, the fin whale happened. We dealt with it over a weekend. But that was also pretty dramatic, being a female totally out of habitat. Very unusual case. So first female to strand that far south in the UK ever.
Wow.
So those are a couple of really dramatic ones over the last few years. Mass stranding in the foul back in 2008. Unbelievable effort by British divers. Unbelievable effort by the Marine Strandings Network and CSIP to deal with that situation, both in terms of the live animals and the dead animals. I think those are sort of 3 really, really key ones.
Any interesting seal ones from anyone's perspective?
I was thinking Sue must have a good seal, so because all the stories, Cornwall Wildlife Trust create this annual report, all the data, seal data is shared with Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust, and they are brilliant at pulling out, you know, trying to map the seals that strand with their live databases. And Sue, you always create, you know, some links which are fantastic each year. Maybe you wanted to add there.
I was just going to say that we do identify some of the dead animals, and anecdotally, because we don't have enough data yet, or we don't have enough IDs yet, it just seems like we have quite a few males who are dying in their teens, when potentially they could be living for at least another 10 years, and we've known them from a very young age live, and then they die and are stranding at what appears to be their prime, and we don't always know why they're dying in their prime. So that's thrown up some quite interesting stuff. I mean, the most interesting seal stranding, I think, is something that Katie and Emily and Marion maybe went to, which was a female who died while she was giving birth to her pup. That was a really fascinating stranding, but I didn't go to that, so I'm sure somebody else can chip in about that experience.
I see the one that I remember as well that we both did was the young male with the chronic entanglement. It's one of the saddest
that
cases.
was shocking. Yeah.
Well, there's been a few of them. I think entanglement cases, full stop, are always shocking, because the amount of trauma that animal's gone through over a protracted period of time really makes you sit up and think. But the one where the skin had actually grown over the monofilament net around this animal's neck was just, when we opened it up, it's just unbelievable. We were cutting down around the knots that were, the knots of the net were appearing through the skin of this animal's neck, because the skin had grown over the neck. And we found out when we dissected it down that this net was still continuous around the animal's neck. And there was a sinus there that had formed. It was full of sand. This animal had essentially been growing into this net. And then, of course, last year's case was just awful. Up at Travail Strand with that juvenile seal with 35 kilos of net that had been dragging around, causing this unbelievable trauma. So, and net entanglements, I think, are probably some of the worst cases we ever see.
Yeah. Have we had any other species of seal strand dead?
Yeah.
Other than Atlantic grey seal and maybe common? Any others?
Harp seal, ring seal. We're not live and dead, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah. We've had hooded seal as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember what the other one was. Hooded seal.
Yeah.
That's right.
And harp.
Yeah. Harp, hooded, ringed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I think we've had all three.
They've had bearded further north. We've never had a bearded down here, I don't think, but they've had bearded further north.
And they haven't all been dead either. So
No.
that's also been quite fascinating. They haven't washed up dead, which kind of, I mean, they could have died, but they could have left and lived.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been called out at BDMLR to live hooded and harp around Cornwall on more than one occasion for both species. The ringed seal that James mentioned was outside the National Marine Aquarium in Plymouth a few years ago. I believe that was the first record for that species for southwest England. These are all Arctic species, so they're called vagrants. Juveniles are known to wander quite long distances, and they have been recorded even further south in places like Portugal and Spain, the Bay of Biscay, places like that as well. So it does seem to be the young animals do wander quite large distances and do sometimes turn up in this country. And of course, as you go further north, as you would expect, you'll find more cases of these vagrant seals turning up. So Orkney, Shetland in particular, relatively speaking, even though it's still a very small number of cases, are the hotspots in the UK for these Arctic species to turn up. And Sue also mentioned bearded seals, I think, as well, which we have had turn up. None down here in the south of the country, but certainly sort of northeast England and around Scotland and Shetland. Again, Shetland seems to get them fairly regularly, actually. The one other one that we...
as well, wasn't there, not long ago?
Oh, you took the wind out of sails. I was going to mention the one. The one other one I was going to mention is we do occasionally get walrus turn up in this country. There have been a few records over the years, and the most recent one was 2 or maybe three years ago, I think it was. That turned up in Orkney, and actually was recorded at a few different locations around the top of Scotland. So it actually went across to the Isle of Lewis or Harris, one of the two. There was a bearded seal around at the same time on the same island as well. And then it went back across to the mainland and was around the outside of Wick Harbour before it disappeared again. So it was around for about 6 weeks. So that's the longest we've known a walrus hang around in this country, and it was totally fine. We were getting inundated with calls about it, saying, it needs to be rescued, you need to take it away, get a helicopter and fly it up to Greenland or something like that. And it's like, no, it's just wandering. It weighs a ton. You know, we can't go in with our little towel and jump it like we do little seal pups. This is completely different. But it was quite a healthy animal. We were regularly, you know, assessing its weight, its body condition, you know, its appearance, and it seemed to be totally fine, and it did move on by itself. So that was a really interesting case, particularly as it kept coming up in quite public places and didn't seem that bothered by people being that close to it either, which of course we would prefer people weren't that close to them in the first place. Sometimes there was a bit of management needed from either our volunteers or even occasionally the police, just to keep crowds back and away from it, because, you know, it's big. If people went right up to it, it could really, really hurt you or just flatten you. So yeah, we have had some really interesting seals turn up over the years.
Yeah, I would add that two really exciting IDs I did was when I was asked to ID the walrus and check that it was the same walrus that was hauling out in various locations. That was fascinating. It's blooming hard to do photo ID on walruses. And the other one was a Mediterranean monk seal. That was very easy to ID.
Here in the UK?
No, that was in the Mediterranean.
Oh,
sorry, but just another ID highlight.
Yeah, I mean, like, all of those stories kind of just highlights that when it comes to, you know, rescues, strandings, even just at postmortems, any kind of sort of conservation story, like, there's just not an ordinary day, is there? It's always different. It keeps you on your toes, and you can never be sure of what's going to happen or what has happened, even. Amazingly, this session has flown by. We've got a little bit of time. I'm going to ask probably a couple more questions that have come through. One of them is slightly related to the whole volunteering situation from Laura. I normally work at sea, but because of the pandemic, have a lot of unexpected time on my hands. Is there any way to get involved with BDMLR at the moment, or do we need to be patient for the COVID situation to further improve?
Yeah, that's something that's very much at the top of my to-do list to sort out again at the moment now. We cancelled or postponed all of our courses, of course, when lockdown came into effect, obviously, but now that we're sort of lifting restrictions and we've got a much better idea of how the world's going to operate again, we're adapting our course quite significantly, actually. We're still in the midst of putting everything together to relaunch it in a completely different format, so there's going to be some really big changes to it when it does re-emerge. We do still have courses sort of a couple of months from now that are available to book on our website, so by the time it comes around to those actually taking place, we're going to have hopefully quite a different course format and be able to still run those being COVID safe as well for everybody.
Great, thank you, Dan. I kind of just want to end with sort of another more general question to all three of you about, you know, how obviously how long has the Strandings Network been running?
Well, it's over 25 years. That's what I always say. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know.
Well, I mean, 25 years is a long time, but of course, like, you know,
can I just read you one thing? So
yeah.
we've been recording. So the Natural History Museum has been collating recordings of stranded cetaceans since 1913. But in 1990, the Natural History Museum started working with the Institute of Zoology. Okay, that eventually became CSIP. Over the last 27 years, and this is our 2018 report, we've been collecting more data, specific data in Cornwall. So that's 2018. So we're talking 29 years, nearly 30 years now. So Stella Turk led it till 2003. Then Jan and Jeff Loveridge took over. And then in 2012, the management of it came back in-house to Cornwall Wildlife Trust. So that's when I started getting involved in 2012. So yes, so sorry, I just had to specific.
Yeah, no, that was really useful, actually, because, you know, obviously it's got a really long history. But I guess my question to all three of you is, in your individual respects, what do you kind of see for the future of the Strandings Network? Like, are there any, you know, different projects that you think might come up, you know, in the near future?
Well, I mean, I just want to start by saying, you know, this sort of data isn't a short-term project. You know, you've got to be bringing in this for decades and decades and decades to really map true changes in our environment and true problems. So, you know, it's something that Cornwall Wildlife Trust are committed to as a core funded project, and something that we will continue for years to come. It's part of our sort of strategic vision. We do anyway. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that really for us. Over to James and Dan.
I think it's very clear from some of the discussions I've had recently with CSIP and JNCC and other people on the government side, that a real focus, though Cornwall, because Cornwall is such a focus for Bycatch, I think it's very clear that more work is going to go on Bycatch. And I know the Cornwall Wildlife Trust has done a phenomenal job as far as getting involved in bycatch awareness and mitigation. But I think from the pathology side, I think it's very clear that there is going to be an increased focus on what we do down here in that respect, and how we are going to contribute to knowledge. You know, I've been tasked with trying to write a paper on bycatch now to try and draw it all together as a starting point. Also potentially looking at the welfare aspects of bycatch, not just the conservation aspects, the individual animal welfare aspects of bycatch is something that I think is really coming out from recent discussions. And we're going to be at the forefront of that, because we are, unfortunately, the bycatch focus hotspot for the UK.
Yeah, leading actually quite nicely on from that, there's some entanglement work that BDMLR and also CSGRT is involved with as well, through sort of an international network we're part of called the Pinniped Entanglement Group. And that's organisations from all around the world sharing their own case studies and particular issues, and also in some cases looking at new techniques for trying to, particularly with adult pinnipeds, trying to catch and disentangle them, because they are so tricky to deal with as well. So there is a bit of work sort of in the background going on there. And along a similar line for cetaceans, with James alluded earlier to the large whale entanglements up in Scotland that happen much more frequently than in other parts of the country, with particularly minke and humpback whales. BDMLR has been a part of a project for the last couple of years called the Scottish Entanglement Alliance, which is working directly with the Creole Fisheries Federation through a funded project from the European Marine and Fisheries Fund, and that's been looking at creating and raising awareness with the Creole fisheries industry, as it does seem to be the Creole fisheries gear that is entangling these animals more frequently than other forms of fishing gear. And we've had some really great success, really good engagement with them. They're very much on board in the partnership as part of the project itself, but also the fishermen have been very keen to work with us, and also in part with our large whale disentanglement team that we have at BDMLR, which is a specialist group of our volunteers who have been trained specially with various bits of very specialist and more technical equipment to affect large whale disentanglements at sea. Another branch of this project is also looking at new techniques for Creole fisheries gear itself to reduce entanglement through the use of new technologies. So there's a big thing now, particularly that's been worked on over in America, but that's also being introduced and trialled over here, which is ropeless gear. So hopefully that would actually solve a lot of the entanglement problem as well if it's successful, and it's something that we're a part of along with whale and dolphin conservation and other partners up in Scotland as well.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks all of you for this great discussion. I mean, as I said, it's flown by. We could sort of go into so many other different aspects of seal strandings and strandings as, you know, in general. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here for this session, and really for everything that you guys do, because, you know, I think the three of you, as well as all of the volunteers involved, are probably some of the most dedicated people I've ever met in my life. So thank you so much. And also, I mean, thank you to everyone who's joined us. It's really great to, you know, get all sorts of different people, familiar, non-familiar, in these sessions. hopefully we're making some really good connections, and you know, we're all learning from each other. Don't forget that we have lots of online talks. If you haven't seen them already on YouTube, just search Cornwall Seal Group. James, Abby and Dan have all done some really interesting focus talks for us, so please do have a look at them. And of course, if you'd like to support us or get hold of any Sealy merchandise, then head to our online shop, sealresearchtrust.com, where you can also find out about our Wild Seal supporters scheme. One more thing, we have a crowdfunder that is launching this Monday, 6th of July, at some time in the morning, time to be confirmed, to help us continue our important work. So do please check that out. There's some really exclusive, awesome rewards that you can get your hands on there. The next session, hopefully we'll see some of you there, is the online network session, where we'll be able to hear from you guys, so you won't all be muted all the time. So that's really exciting. I really look forward to hearing all about you. And thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, see you all.